There's been a lot of talk about Facebook, and so I'm going to set this up with a Mark Zuckerberg story. And I've never told this to an audience before. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but I guess it was 4 years ago at Davos, and everywhere I went, people were saying, Mark Zuckerberg's trying to find you. He wants to talk to you. And so we were finally able to get connected, and I sat down with him and Matt Kohler, another one of the Facebook guys. And the first thing he said was, we read your book, Wikinomics, and we just loved this book, and we just thought it would be so great to meet you. And I'm sitting there thinking, these guys built a social network with 80 million people on it that's kind of changing the face of the world, and I wrote a book, and they're impressed by me? Like, what's wrong with that picture? But anyway, they said, seriously, the reason we want to meet you is we want to get your advice on what we should do with Facebook. Where should we take this company? And I said, no brainer, Facebook for the enterprise. Sure, you can build a $50 billion company on your existing model of advertising, but enterprises will pay for software. You ever heard of SAP, Oracle, IBM? Why don't you build a company that has real customers that pay you to use your service? And we got into a big discussion about it. And I said, there's another $50 billion company there. Came back a couple of days later, and they said, you know, we thought a lot about what you said, and we decided we disagree with you. We've got 80 million people on Facebook. We figured there's 2 billion addressable market. We have less than 5% of market share. And what we want to do with the company is create the telephone network for the 21st century. And reflecting on the conversation, I realized I had misunderstood their question. I thought they were asking, how do you build a company with a whole bunch of revenue that could be worth a lot? And they weren't asking that. They were asking me, how can we change the world? And change the world they are. Now, what I'd like to do in the next 13 and a half minutes is to try and give you my unauthorized view about what is wrong with the world and how do we fix it. And it's true, some of you may have seen Wikinomics. This is about the corporation. And we argue that social networking is becoming social production, that this is not about hooking up online. There's a new mode of production that's in the making. And that this is changing the deep structure and architecture of the corporation, how we orchestrate capability to innovate, to create goods and services, and to create wealth in society. Well, the book was a big book, and many of you have read this book. And a couple of years after it came out, something big happened. And I remember the moment that it hit me. I was speaking at a big conference, 7,000 bankers in Brussels. And it was called Sibos, and it was September the 18th, 2008. And Lehman, Merrill, Solomon, all these big companies had gone under. And I looked out at this vast sort of sea of deer in the headlights, and it occurred to me, you know, Bob Dylan, there's something going on here, and you don't know what it is. And I began to think that the financial services industry is going to need a lot more than a fresh infusion of capital and some new regulation. It's going to need a whole new modus operandi built on a new set of principles of integrity and interdependence, understanding that business can't succeed in a world that's failing. Principles for collaboration and transparency. And that we now have a new global technology platform to rethink what it means to be a bank and how the whole global financial services industry operates. Now, flash forward a couple of years, and it was a month ago, I was in Berlin, and the speaker right before me at a conference was Paul Krugman, you know, New York Times columnist. And he stood up and he said, you know, when you have a financial meltdown like this, you move into a prolonged period of slump. Japan had one in 1992. They're still in a slump. So his view is get ready for a couple of decades of global economic ugliness, and that's the good news. See, because bad things can happen, like, say, Spain defaults on its sovereign debt. That brings down the euro. All of Europe collapses. The world goes into a global depression. Now, far be it from me to debate a Nobel Prize-winning economist, but I have a bit of a different view. My view, I'm of the view that the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved. And we can achieve a very different future. But to do that, we need to understand what the problem is. And the problem doesn't fall within the framework of traditional economists that are wondering about more fiscal stimulation or not. The problem is not a cyclical one, it's a secular one. We are going through a turning point in human history. Arguably, the industrial age is finally run out of gas. And we could look at, if we had the time, we could look at 16 institutions, every one of them in various stages of being stalled or in atrophy or failure. Look at these. The Industrial Age Corporation, epitomized by America's greatest company ever, General Motors, it went bankrupt. Now, for each of these old models from the industrial age, there are sparkling new initiatives that are underway to rebuild these institutions around the web and around a whole new set of principles, as I described. Financial services industry, I mentioned that. Newspapers going bankrupt. 70 newspapers have gone under in the United States in the last decade. And the basic business value proposition of the newspaper is no longer valid. All the cost and complexity of finding the news, producing it, distributing it, this is no longer a problem. As one youngster said to us, if the news is important, it will find me. So I asked a youngster on a panel, her name was Rahaf Harfouche, she's about 20 years old at the time. I said, I bet you're part of the so-called dumbest generation. Aren't you ignorant? I bet you don't read the newspaper. But you probably don't watch the evening news. I bet you get your news from Jon Stewart and The Daily Show on Comedy Central. Aren't we lost because of your generation? And she replied to me, she said, well, I don't think that's a fair characterization of my generation. I think I'm informed, my friends are, but it's true, Mr. Tapscott, I don't read the newspaper. Then she says, putting it back to me, she says, but Mr. Tapscott, have you ever seen one of those things? They come out once a day. And they don't have hot links, they're not multimedia, and you get this weird black stuff on your fingers. She says, let me tell you how I get informed. It's called an RSS feed. I have 60 of them. I like to triangulate the news. I have opinions that I don't agree coming to me so that I can form my own point of view. She says, you are right, I don't watch evening news, but does anybody? Sam Donaldson told me the average age of the ABC Nightly News is 64. She says, you're also right, I do watch The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but not to get the news. I don't think The Daily Show would be funny unless you know the news. So, newspapers and that model of informing ourselves are going away. Now, it raises all kinds of issues. How do we ensure good journalism? How do we ensure that journalists get paid? How do we avoid this balkanization that's happening, especially in the United States, where each of us can kind of sign up only for that point of view we agree with and be part of a little self-reinforcing echo chamber where the information that's coming to us is not so much to inform, but to give us comfort? Anyway, I could go on and on. Our systems for global problem solving are stalled. So all these nation states go off to Cancun, they try and get a meaningful deal, they can't. Meanwhile, I estimate there are 20 million people on this planet that are using the web to organize around climate change. This is the first time in human history when the world is being mobilized and we're all on the same side. We've been mobilized before, but we were on different sides with world wars. Turns out the killer app for mass collaboration may be saving the planet, literally. So we could go on and on. The university, Universities losing its monopoly on higher education. You know, in the United States, the smartest kids don't go to lectures. The big thing is to get an A without having ever gone to the lecture. You know, the lecture, broadcast, mass education, mass production, mass distribution, mass media, mass democracy. I'm a teacher, I have knowledge. You're a student, you're an empty vessel, you don't. Get ready. Here it comes. You know what? One youngster at Harvard said to me, why would I go to a lecture with 200 students who are listening to a teaching assistant telling us about Peter Drucker when I can go and interact with a real-time Peter Drucker on the web? So on and on it goes. Now, you know what? If you want to understand what's happening, I don't think you go back with deference to Paul Krugman to 1991 or 1982 or even the Great Depression. You have to go back earlier. Hundreds of years ago, all around the world, we had an agrarian society, and the mode of production was called feudalism, and knowledge was concentrated in tiny oligopolies. People didn't know about things. There was no concept of progress. You were born and you died. But when Johannes Gutenberg came up with his great invention, people started to have knowledge. And all of a sudden, the institutions of agrarian feudal society appeared to be stalled, in atrophy, frozen, failing. It didn't make sense for the church to be doing medicine. It didn't make sense for a bunch of kings and nobles to be making all the decisions in society. So we saw the rise of parliamentary democracy, the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther called the printing press God's highest act of grace. We saw the creation of the university, of science, the modern corporation, the Industrial Revolution, and it was good. Industrial capitalism advanced our economy, our standard of living, but it came with a cost. And now, the technology genie is out of the bottle once again, and we have something very different today that's revolutionizing every institution. It's finally happening. The internet, of course, is very different. The printing press gave us access to the written word. The web enables us to each be a producer. The printing press gave us access to recorded knowledge. The web gives us access to the knowledge contained in the crania of other people on a global basis. This is taking us into nothing less than a new age of networked intelligence. Now, what I just said may be kind of familiar to some of you. This is not a new idea. I've been writing about this for 30 years. Some of you may have read a book by Alvin Toffler many years ago. It's got to be almost 30 years ago, called The Third Wave. We talked about agrarian, industrial, and an information society. These were ideas in waiting. Their time had not come. They were waiting for a new global collaborative platform. They were waiting for a new generation of digital natives for whom all of this is like the air. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language. They were waiting for the social revolution brought to you by social networking. They were waiting for some changes to business and to the global economy, ultimately creating a giant collapse and a burning platform for us to start to reimagine and re-envisage all of these institutions around a new model. So let me just give you one quick example. Let's take healthcare. Industrial model, right? I'm a doctor, I have knowledge. You're a patient, you don't. Get ready, here it comes. You're isolated, by the way. Do you know that isolation is the #1 risk factor in health? A little proposal for Germany. When you're born, every German baby should get a website. And that's half healthcare record, half social network for health. You get to collaborate. Security and privacy. The medical profession provides the data, but you have full transparency into your own record. And you know what? If you have ALS or some other rare disease, you can join the equivalent of patients like me to collaborate. And all of this provides a foundation for science, as these embryonic collaborative platforms do. We need to move from mass production, industrial age healthcare, to collaborative healthcare. And if we do that, we can radically reduce costs because patients will happily take responsibility for their own health and at the same time dramatically improve the quality of healthcare. So it's been a long day, and I'd like to end by just showing you a little video and talking to it. And this will take us up to 90,000 feet. If we could run that video, that would be super. Anthony Williams and I, towards the end of the book, could we turn down the volume on the music, please? Yeah, towards the end of the book, we started wondering what an age of networked intelligence might look like. And we went to nature to try and find some examples. We came across this thing called the murmuration. Sheep come in flocks, fish come in schools, starlings come in murmurations. And across the moors of England, for winter and during winter, starlings are out during the day, kind of doing their starling thing. They're looking for food and that kind of stuff. And then they come together at the cold night, and they create one of the most spectacular shows in all of nature. The murmuration is not just for show, though. It refers to the murmuring of the bird's wings. Look at that hawk being chased away by the birds. The murmuration protects the birds. It warms them up for the cold night ahead. There's a sort of social organization that's underway. And this is not some kind of collective intelligence or consciousness, because birds are not conscious or intelligent. It's more a loosely conjoined set of impulses. Leadership changes all the time. There's no one great leader selling a vision down to everybody. And but when the moment is right, this amazing thing happens. And the scientists that have studied this have said they've never actually seen an accident. So the point, what would it mean if we could connect the brains of humans on a global basis through vast pipes of glass and air? See, starlings aren't intelligent, but humans are. Could we go beyond just sharing information or sharing knowledge to get to the point where we're actually starting to share our intelligence? Perhaps even creating some kind of limited consciousness within an organization or within a community or even beyond. Now, is this just a fanciful idea, or is it something that could give us some hope and something to work on? If it were true, think about the elusive challenges that we've had within organizations, creating learning organizations. Maybe organizations like people that aren't conscious can't learn. And that consciousness is a precondition for having a learning organization. If we could expand this more broadly throughout the economy and throughout society, maybe we could move away from this balkanization and this sort of planned ignorance that we seem to be developing, to open up those neural pathways between us, to create some kind of new perspectives on how to solve the many problems that plague the world. You know, there was a French pilot from the Second World War. His name was Saint-Exupéry, and a philosopher. And he said, we should welcome the future, for soon it will be the past. But we should respect the past, for it was once all that was humanly possible. Is it now possible to go forward such that this age of network intelligence might be an age of promise fulfilled and of peril unrequited? I don't know. Thank you.